Drilling fluids touch just about everything in the drilling process. We're here to deconstruct the drilling process and drilling fluid concepts to provide a deeper understanding of our industry. In each episode, we'll share information, talk to interesting people, and maybe share a few stories along the way. Welcome to the Flowline, a production of AES Drilling Fluids, brought to you by Matt Offenbacher and Justin Gauthier.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Flowline. Matt Offenbacher, as always, and I are here in the lovely studio at the AES corporate office in Houston, Texas. Matt, with all this beautiful weather that's been upon us, have you been enjoying it? And if so, what have you been enjoying it with?
Well, I've been out of the country, but I guess for me, I will say that I left a week ago, and it was... what was it like? It was miserable. And then I was like, my goodness, Houston, come on.
Right.
And then it got better over the weekend, and I at least got to see, it was like, oh man, this is great.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
But, we're in that fall period where you get teased repeatedly, where you get like a little bit of nice weather and you're like, all right, it's happening. And then you'll just have this like 95-degree day and get scorched, and you're like, but I thought summer was ending. And that'll go through like October.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah. No, that's true. And actually, if anyone spent some time in Midland lately, I was there last week, I think. Yeah. No, 2 weeks ago. And it was, high 50s in the morning, and it was great. And then even here too, waking up at 5:30, 5 o'clock, it's usually around that, 65 to 70, sometimes higher. But yeah, we're getting a little bit of a hint of some cooler weather, which is nice. And if you spend any time outside, for kids' sports, or if you just enjoy being outside, now is a great time.
Good sunrises and sunsets. That's what I'm seeing lately and appreciating.
Yeah, no, it's nice. And then of course we'll have the fall back in time that's going to happen. Are you pro or anti daylight savings?
I'd say anti. I mean, I don't know the appropriate side to land on if we got rid of it, but you just hear it, like there's way more people that have heart attacks that day, and like just all this stuff where it's like, why are we doing this to ourselves, guys? Like, and if you have kids, like it's great when it gets dark earlier because like they don't know the difference.
Yeah, it's like, it's bedtime. It's like 6 o'clock.
Yes. Yeah, but I mean, my 7-year-old can tell time now, so like he pushes back.
That's funny.
But I don't know. It's one of those. I mean, and of course, fall back is great because you get the extra hour, but you got to pay with spring forward. So, what's your position on the matter?
I like the change, but I don't like the effect of it on the kids. I actually used to enjoy it.
Yeah.
Because in the fall back, I actually kind of like going into the winter months where it gets dark earlier, and you kind of get the whole sort of season effect. And then a spring ahead, it's like, yes, more sunlight, but the hour change with kids is what throws me off. So if I had to pick one, I'd probably just stick with, what we have throughout the summer and just leave it as it is right now.
Yeah.
It's kind of cool when you do the fall back because the day starts a little earlier. But then, it starts to get dark at like 5:30, 6 o'clock. So anyway, I don't know. I don't think about it too much, but it is just funny that there's a lot of people who really just despise it, and there's, I think, people trying to petition to change it and stuff. I don't know.
I mean, I think Congress actually passed it and the president never signed it. There was something where they were going to get rid of it.
Yeah.
But, they moved it. This was during the Bush administration, and like everybody freaked out because they're like, this is hard to adjust to with computer systems and flight planning and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
And I think the Europeans just ended up matching what we were doing for simplicity. So I'm kind of curious if it would be like a global movement if we canned it.
Oh, yeah. No kidding.
And some places don't even do it. Like Hawaii doesn't do it.
Yeah.
I don't think China does it either.
And I don't think where my mom lives in Mexico, they do it either.
Yeah.
Yeah, because whenever it changes, she always reminds me that she didn't change in case I was concerned of the time difference. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks, Mom.
Yeah.
I was really looking forward to making sure I knew what your time zone was. But nonetheless, speaking of governments and agencies and changes, of course, that would kind of bring it, kind of get out of the weeds on the drilling fluid topics and talk more just industry wide. And Matt, you brought this up, and it all ties together. But when you look at, if anyone's familiar with looking at energy data, a lot of the agencies out there, and the one a lot of people are familiar with here is the EIA. They report on a bunch of different data, and it's not even oil and gas, but just any energy related data is sort of the, I don't know if you want to call it the go-to, but it's a pretty standard, right? The EIA numbers, a lot of people, a lot of analysts and stuff, they reference it. And then you have the one overseas in Paris, it's called the IEA. And what most of them do is they provide outlooks on global energy supply and demand, which obviously involves oil and gas supply and demand. And so this just kind of give an idea there. But an interesting thing happened lately, and that has been happening. But when they report, a lot of people kind of laugh at the outlook because it's always, it always changes when they say, oh, the outlook into the next 10 years is whatever. Then that 10 years comes and they're not even close. But
Yes.
what would you say the common theme is about a lot of these outlooks? Just to kind of build that in there.
Well,
first.
I mean, the IEA in particular is it's always revised upwards. So the running joke, there's graphs you can find where it shows their forecasts and what it actually was going back 10, 15 years.
Yeah.
And everything always has to get revised upwards, which implies bias, right? Like if you're going to...
And what do you mean by revised upwards? Just explain that first.
So they'll forecast like energy demand and oil and gas consumption is going to be this.
Right.
And then fast forward a couple of years and it's way higher than what they said.
Right.
And so they're like, haha, just kidding. Here's what we think it's going to be. And then a few years later, they'll be like, haha, just kidding. Here's what we think it's going to be because we've been wrong.
Right.
And so, I mean, there's been a bit of a showdown, showdown with OPEC, because OPEC's like, you guys have no idea what you're talking about. This is more of like a pipe dream than a reality. Yeah. And, of course, let's face it, OPEC, people would assume might have some biases as well. So,
right.
Anyways, the center of this article that I thought was interesting is in 2021, the IEA said that no new investment is needed in a net zero by 2050 scenario. So basically, you don't need to you don't need to invest in any more exploration or anything. Just basically, like, that's it. Mm-hmm. And then very recently, they said just to keep output flat among faster decline rates at existing fields, oil and gas investment is desperately needed. And so it says only a small portion of upstream oil and gas investment is used to meet increases in demand, while nearly 90% of upstream investment annually is dedicated to offsetting losses of supply at existing fields. Mm-hmm. That's a quote from IEA Executive Director Fatih Birol.
Right. And can you explain, I can jump in here too, but explain that. And the reason I say is because a lot of people who've been in unconventionals their whole lives, naturally, they think they understand the quick decline rates. But what that sort of that quote is from Fatih Birol is saying is that most of the investment goes to just keeping the same amount of production going because of how fast the wells fall off and decline. And the reason for that is most of the incremental gain in supply has come from unconventionals here in the U.S. over the last decade.
Exactly.
So you're drilling wells and they're coming on hard, but they're falling off hard. So you get on this treadmill effect. And so just to keep production flat, all while global oil demand is going up, it takes investment. But again, totally different than a few years ago, them saying, oh, no, we don't need any more investment. Well, clearly just to keep up with what we're doing takes a ton of investment. In fact, like he's saying here, 90% of it is just to keep going the way we are.
Yes. And I mean, I think we're coming off the backside of a cycle where you had sort of the ESG movement, and it has moved to probably the energy security movement now. But there was this, hey, we got all these other technologies, we're going to displace oil and gas. And I think, you and I have talked on this podcast, and certainly not in this podcast, at length about how, the narrative just doesn't make any sense and like, where does this end kind of thing. And I think there's a bit of an argument that as people were saying, oh, we don't need to do anything, it actually delayed, it puts us behind the eight ball of saying, hey, we probably should have picked up on this earlier. Like, the narrative didn't work. It wasn't working when they were saying it. Yeah. But what it created was possibly a lag where, in a few years, maybe we find ourselves really short on supply, which I guess, that'll to some degree be the cure, is higher prices to promote more exploration and development.
Yeah.
But there'll be a lag that could affect people.
Yeah.
So
No, that's so in saying that, and now that this gentleman and sort of the narrative or sort of the theme now is, we are maybe underinvested and we need to. I mean, how do you think that plays into policy, maybe here and then internationally?
Yeah, it's one of those, because the narrative hasn't matched reality for a while. I don't know, in as much as in the U.S. we have a very a presumably oil-friendly administration, but does it mean the next person who gets elected, if they're on the other side of the aisle, are they going to double down on sort of a different ideology, or are they going to be an energy security focused person and say, look, I'm not messing with this?
Yeah.
But I think that if you look at what's happening in California, which I don't know if you'd read about this, but basically they're sort of forcing a bunch of refineries to close.
Yeah. And
the problem is California gasoline is a pretty specific blend. It isn't made elsewhere. And it's, environmental restrictions, very high prices.
Jeez.
And then you've got a strict regulatory environment where a lot of these companies say, look, it's just not worth it. Like, we're going to close it. And it's come to a head now where Newsom is racing to basically pay a refinery to stay open that was going to close, because otherwise they could have gas shortages. Like, they can't, the gasoline we produce in Texas would not be acceptable to them.
Wow.
So,
which could force all kinds of things to happen, and naturally that's pretty inflationary, I would imagine, by nature.
Yeah, and I mean, it's a little scary. I think the assumption was that, everybody would be in EVs by now or something, but from a just energy availability perspective, they're struggling. People are reopening nuclear reactors. They're doing all these other, not just oil and gas, but all the above energy is becoming, I think, probably more of how policy is. But I think you've still got, for example, I was just in Europe, and you see just some countries are really doubled down on that they're going to continue to eliminate fossil fuels, but it's devastating their economy. And a lot of them are starting to punt on, we're going to get rid of gasoline cars by 2035. And you're seeing a little bit of shake on policy, but ideology is a tough thing to break. So it'll just be interesting to see how that flexes. But I believe that there will be some people who either inevitably will, but how soon their hands are forced, or they sort of alter their perspective. Yeah. It doesn't seem as obvious as I hope it was.
Sure.
What are your thoughts on this?
Man, I don't know. I'm pretty optimistic. I'm, talking to, we were in Dallas last week for a conference. Got to hear folks from Barclays and folks talk. And they're kind of along the same lines as, when we look domestically, we're not necessarily looking for the public markets for their money anymore. It's more we have to fund ourselves. And so I guess kind of bringing it home, I think it provides, I think it's laying a foundation for a pretty good upcycle with quite a bit of runway for us here. Because the reality is, it's just, if you look at demand outlook, it's fair to say that it's going to keep going up and to the right.
Yep.
And so with that said, is who's going to fill the gap? I mean, OPEC and the rest of the world can only do so much. But if we remain in an environment where, we're not restricted by, shitty or hard permitting and we're getting a lot of pushback from the government, if they kind of just allow us to do our job and fund it ourselves, I think for us here, it provides a pretty good opportunity. That's kind of my sort of really high level take, but the revisions are crazy because they continue to be broken. And so with that being said, is the EV adoption and everything else are under some major assumptions that I don't think are playing out. So the replacement for fossil fuels, I don't think is in the near term at all.
No, and I don't think anyone believes that. I mean, basically, when they say, "Oh, solar's exploding," it's like, well, it is, but hydrocarbons continue and have for over a century, I think, provided about, what is it, like 84 to 87% of all energy. I mean, that's hydrocarbons, everything, right? Coal, natural gas, oil. But that's not going to change very much.
Yeah.
In essence, like 1 or 2% shift. And solar, of course, you have the other issues like nameplate capacity versus actual generation and blah, 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 right? But I do think from an opportunity perspective, that like workers in oil and gas, I think, like it's one of those, for those of us who are able to stick it through, I think there will be an upcycle, and they're really going to be needing our support to see it through.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's just sort of the story of the oil field, right? You stick around long enough and like, you catch an upcycle and things can be pretty good.
Yeah. What I would almost say is, I think, again, this could be totally wrong, but my projection is that we'll have a bit more of a stable oil field here in the U.S. And now, again, if the commodity prices go crazy, then that's all out the window. But if things kind of remain the same, rig count's going to continue to decrease, and then I think to stay relatively flat. But I don't think you're going to see these major swings in rig count. And so hopefully, if prices don't go crazy, we go into this sort of period of somewhat stability, while being a smaller industry, if you look at just, people and assets and stuff, but we'll be really efficient. And where I think that sets up too, and you're starting to see it a small bit now, is you're starting to see Permian rig counts kind of flat and drop, but you're starting to see rigs being added into these other basins. And I don't know if it's because break evens have come down enough to where you can actually start drilling these fringe basins profitably, or if people are just using the end of year budget. I don't know. It could be like that too.
Yeah.
But I could see a little bit more exploration in areas now that we've gotten technology proven to extract, and again, the whole efficiency thing, right? Like you talk about that, you listen to people, oh, we're so efficient and we can frack 24 hours pumping nonstop, and at the conference they're talking about like they're close to being able to pump weeks nonstop, which is crazy. And so if you can lower the cost of supply, well, then you can start going back into these other basins that left a bunch of oil and gas underground, but with technology from 5 years ago, it didn't make sense. So let's just all hop in the Permian. So I could see a shift at where we start producing from, which would present a good opportunity for folks like in the Rockies or in northern New Mexico, or just parts of the Mid-Con. So I think that sets up a little bit for that to happen too, and then in the short term, midterm.
Yeah. Well, and I do think you're seeing, at least with gas, a little bit more like, hey, let's poke a hole in the ground here because it's interesting long term with LNG prospects. Yeah. I think, I think, in short, like it's tough out there, and I don't want to overlook that, but I also think there's reasons for optimism that things should pick up a bit, and I thought maybe we could wrap discussing this graphic. Arjun Murti, who has he was with Goldman. He has a podcast called Super Spiked. Yeah. And I enjoy his sort of view on pricing and sort of where the markets are. And he had this graphic, and it was basically like, it's a pyramid. And it's, the bottom of the pyramid is availability, 24/7, 365. Then the next tier is affordable and secure. And the very top is clean air, clean water, biodiversity, low carbon. And in essence, what he's pointing out is that you have all of these, you have people who are looking at that very top of the pyramid, the low carbon, that sort of thing. Mm-hmm. But those are the richest countries. Right. Everybody else who is looking at the richer countries is saying, hey, I would like energy 24/7. I would like it to be affordable and secure for the people of my country. Right. The last thing that I'm going to prioritize, and you see this, in development everywhere, is you get these basics out of the way, and then you have time to look around and say, you know what, we need to clean up, or let's maybe be willing to spend a little bit more to accept something that has some other benefits.
Yeah.
But
It's the environmental Kuznets curve.
yes, that's what. Yeah, that one.
Yeah.
And I mean, there's a lot of people who discuss that in as much as, you look at, for example, with Russia and these sanctions and everything, and India has said, look, we're going to buy the cheapest oil because we got a lot of poor people.
Yeah.
And it's just, okay, regardless of where you stand on, policy towards the Russia-Ukraine situation,
Yeah.
these leaders are saying, like, I've got to look out for my people first.
For sure. And because he references it as like the lucky billion or lucky 6 billion, or he has
The lucky billion, I think, and then he's like, hey, you got 7 billion more people
Yeah.
who like don't have this.
Right. And so, yeah, the lucky billion who have, the access to 24/7, 365, and then the affordable and secure energy, speaking as if that represents the rest of the world, when the reality is it actually represents a small part of the world. And so we need to consider the other folks, which, to your point, and tying that all together, is this: there's a lot of people out there that would give up everything to just have access to clean water and electricity for 24 hours a day. And so they're not worried about whether they should put up solar panels or burn diesel fuel. They just want access to energy.
Yes.
And again, and I think there is a case for certain parts of the world where it might make more economic sense to throw up a solar panel farm for somebody in a certain region, right? It's just like, what makes the most sense for the region at the right at the right price.
Yeah.
And so it's, again, I don't know if you listen to Chris Wright sort of battle the All In podcast folks at the All In Summit they had recently.
No.
Yeah, they again, Chris Wright, I'm sure everyone who knows, former CEO of Liberty, and now he's the Energy Department of
Secretary.
Energy Secretary.
Yeah.
Again, you can clearly tell he's very pro fossil fuels, and he has the same sort of stance and sort of comments around, when the wind doesn't blow and the sun don't shine, it doesn't make sense to have all this stuff. But I say that to say is it's, he is very, if you've ever read Bettering Human Lives, he does make note of, it takes all of it.
Yes.
But the overall reality is the demand for oil and gas has not gone anywhere, and it's probably not going to. So let's not, again, it's very nuanced, obviously, but it takes everything. But again, just it is comical, kind of going back to how we started this, is everyone's revised their outlook. And at what point will they be right? I don't know. I don't think we've reached peak oil, even though you can see articles from in probably, I think, the 70s or decades ago they talked about it. But again, folks, we sit in this low $60, and some even say that we'll be in the 50s here before long. But I wouldn't get too concerned. We've been here before, and we've always climbed out and thrived for several years after it. So I'm not too worried about it.
We'll see what the IEA projects as prices move.
Right. Yeah. Anything else, Matt?
I just think it's an interesting discussion, as much as we want to know the future, and it provides like some anxiety, I think, to, for those of us that work in energy, that like, man, can we just have some stable, healthy prices that like work for industry, work for the consumers just as much as like they could work for the producers. And I think we'll get there. I think there's a whole other, area of, and this is where following the Super Spiked podcast is good, is
yes.
The whole like, OPEC's gonna, unwind more cuts, and then people are looking and saying, well, yes, they've unwound the cuts, but they're not actually producing that much more. Yeah, those kinds of things where there's a bunch of technical stuff where narrative doesn't match data, and those kinds of things. So, anyways, time will tell. But I think it goes back to, like we always say, we can't control prices, so let's control what we control. Like, go work your tail off, do the best you can.
Yeah.
If you're in the service side, make some customers happy. If you're on the operator side, be efficient.
Yeah.
And it'll all shake out in the end.
It will. And I guess the last thing I'll say on that, and just to touch on the people folks, or like on the people side of our industry, is I think regardless, even if these projections or outlooks sort of get, smashed and demand keeps going up. I think the reality is the oil field will continue to shrink by way of, companies, headcount. And I don't say that to, be like, oh, Mr. Negative, but the reality is you look around, there's a lot of folks laying people off. And the amount of people it takes to produce the same amount of oil ultimately has gone down. Mm-hmm. And that's just, business and markets working. So do your best. If you're out there, don't get complacent. Even just companies, not, let alone people. Companies have to remain diligent and, prove their value. And it's the same with the people in the industry, because the reality is all these efficiency gains are happening. And so I think the labor force is shifting, now, like for us, like we were 6-7 years ago, were we hiring data analysts and, people to build out crazy software for us? No. And now we are. So there's interesting new jobs coming into the force, but the traditional jobs I think are maybe not going to be in as high demand as they were, say, 6-7 years ago, or say pre-COVID.
I tend to agree with that. I think when you kicked it off and it was like, okay, we're shrinking. Like to some degree, yes. I think every down cycle we get tempted to paint a line graph, and it goes back to like if prices get too high, then you have some really stupid hiring, and that it's not good for anyone either. Yeah. But I
guess shifting would be a better term to use instead of shrinking.
Yeah, and I think that comes down to like, hey, be educated, embrace these things, because imagine like even with fracking right now, like imagine what it was like to be working on a frack crew 10 years ago versus today, or even 5, with electronic fracks and all these other forms of automation that are really driving efficiencies. The person operating that equipment either learned how to evolve or they got out. Yeah. And I think, that's true of so many businesses that encounter technology some way. Is it's like the story with AI. AI might not replace you, but someone using it will. Yeah. So I think it's just sometimes we get tempted to resist change, and it's probably not a good time to do that.
Right. So, be adaptable and be open-minded to try new things. And if you get thrown in a role that seems odd, take it.
Do it well.
Yeah, exactly. But interesting conversation, Matt. I'm glad you brought this up. If any of the listeners out there have any comments, I'm sure you do. If you're listening, you're probably if you're like us, you like this kind of stuff. And so reach out, provide your 2 cents, maybe throw some projections out there that you think might have some merit. And we'd be happy to talk about them. And with that being said, everyone, you can reach us at the Flowline podcast at aesfluids.com, or reach out to us on LinkedIn. Connect with the AES LinkedIn page. Lots of great content put out there. Tech tips, YouTube, if you like to learn visually. Matt and the team have put just a ton of great content out there to learn from. That's about it for now, Matt. We'll catch you next time, folks. Cheers.
Take care.
Thanks for listening. Please tune in next week for another exciting episode of The Flowline. And remember, may your returns always be full and your trips always smooth. Views expressed in this program belong to participants and not their employees. The program is for informational purposes only and cannot take the place of seeking professional advice. Copyright AES Drilling Fluids.